Oh, yeah, no, we're good. Okay, cool, man. We're ready to roll. Thank you, Javier, for taking a minute out today. I appreciate it.
Of course, yeah. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So before we get into your latest album, The Blackland, I want to know, COVID did quite a thing on all of us. And I'm curious how you survived that 3 years and how it's changed the way that you do things now.
Yeah, well, like most musicians, especially people living in New York City, I was just kind of doing uh, at-home recordings and stuff like that. I was trying to keep my chops up playing, and then like a lot of people switched over doing a lot of at-home recordings and stuff like that to try to continue to be productive. I was also doing a lot of these um, technically like illegal Hasidic weddings in Brooklyn. That was like another big source of income at the time. And one of the big things that ended up happening is three military job openings like happened in the midst of COVID while I was just collecting New York City unemployment. I was like, well, this is probably the time for me to take one of these auditions with the Airman of Note and the U.S. Army Blues. And I was fortunate enough; I actually won a spot in both jobs, and ended up transitioning down to the D.C., Baltimore, or DMV areas they call it during the pandemic. Seemed like the best time to do that. I wouldn't feel like I was missing out on anything, and yeah, so that was how I ended up coming out on the other end of the pandemic. It seemed like it turned out to be a good situation.
So talk to me a little bit about the new album. How does it feel now with the world waking up? Things are getting busier. Is there a level of cathartic vibes that are going into this? What's this release mean for you?
Um, I mean, there's not really much to do with the pandemic on this release. It's really just a compilation of a lot of music that I've been working on for a really long time. Some of the music stuff that I wrote when I was still an undergraduate student back like at Juilliard between 2008 and 2012, stuff that I went back and kind of revised and kind of like brought back to the level that I feel is necessary now with my, more highly trained ears and arranging technique. And then some of the stuff is a little bit newer, but it's just an album of some of my favorite compositions that I put together, um, and I thought like work together as a unit. You
So
know.
what are you hoping the listener gets from this album?
Well, I mean, there is like a little bit of like a messaging kind of thing, but not really. I mean, in reality, when one of the things I really love about music is that it means something different for every person that listens to it. So one person might hear some of these tunes and think that it sounds cacophonous and crazy. Another person might be this might be the thing that like makes their day and makes them feel really happy. And I just hope that whichever listener, whenever someone listens to it, it just is uplifting. I feel like that's the spirit of my music generally. I don't really write super uh super dense or dark sounding music. I think that generally the spirit of my music is more on the uplifting side and more fun, groove oriented. So I hope that that's the result, generally speaking.
So your debut was called Freedom, released in 2020. Does it feel good to be past that and to be at a different place right now in your career?
Yeah, definitely. I think, man, I mean, the pandemic really forced a lot of, like personal and professional changes and like in so many people's lives and myself included. I think I released Freedom in 2018 or 20, I can't remember actually. I can't remember when I released my other CD. I think it might have been like 2019. So that was out for like a year um, before the pandemic started. I think I'm actually speaking completely incorrectly about my own album. I think maybe that was released during the pandemic, actually. Maybe that's when I finally had the time to release it.
Yeah.
It feels like it was like another time, right?
Oh man,
You think
it all
about
blurs.
that's like the before times,
Yep.
that like that movie, The Giver.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I joked around for a while there when it started. I said BC is now going to be before Corona. So
that's pretty
there we
good.
go. Well, hey man, I'm curious. You have such a great acumen. You're really, early on in your career. How did this whole jazz journey begin for you? Where were you born and raised, and how did the music begin for you?
I'm born and raised. I'm from Washington State originally. I grew up in the Seattle area, in a suburb called Federal Way, Washington. And then when I was going into middle school, we moved a few hours south to Vancouver, Washington, which is like just across the river from Portland, Oregon. So I'd say that the general formation of me as a musician kind of came from the Portland area. I used to do a lot of music related things. I did like the Metropolitan Youth Symphony across the river there. I was also part of a conglomerate band that was led by a pretty famous educator named Thera Memory. And he led this program called the American Music Program. And it was kind of all the best jazz musicians and hotshots in the area. They would all come together and we got to do like a little bit of touring and stuff. We go to all the big festivals across the country. Went to the Berkeley Jazz Festival. We auditioned for the essentially Ellington, and we actually won that one a couple times in the conglomerate division before they allowed us to actually compete in person. So they would send out clinicians. So I'd say like that was like a really big formative thing. Obviously, my high school program was also very was very well managed as well. We had like a really good marching band. We one of those schools. We had two jazz bands. We had three wind ensembles. And yeah, my high school band directors were really great too. One of them in particular, I still keep in contact with Lewis Norfleet, who now directs a band in Southern Oregon. I just went out last summer and worked with his band and played a concert with him too. So
Right on. I
yeah.
just had Thera Memory on the show a couple weeks ago and dug into the history and did an expose. So that's funny you mentioned that name right now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah. So talk to me a little bit about who were some early influences on you? Who were you digging on, album wise and vibe wise?
Uh, well, ironically, one of my biggest influences in high school because we were always, most high school band programs, it's like it's structured as like it's like a team sport almost, So like everyone, like everything for jazz is always the big band. So that's always been like my entry point is like playing in a trombone section, playing in a band. Um, and so one of my biggest influence was always listening to big band music. So I think it came naturally that I ended up started writing for that stuff. But the Airmen of Note, a few of their records I caught wind of when I was in high school, and I've been listening to them for many many years. So when the decision which band to choose to um, uh, to enter came up between the two, the Airmen of Note and the U.S. Army Blues, that was a tough decision too because I grew up listening to the Airmen of Note and their records. U.S. Army Blues I didn't know as much about, but it seemed like the gig was going to be a little bit better fit for my lifestyle. Anyway, sorry, I got off a little on a tangent
Oh, you're
there.
good.
But obviously, as far as just as a trombone soloist, there were great soloists in that band as well. But J.J. Johnson, Curtis Fuller, Slide Hampton. I also grew up hearing a lot of Freddie Hubbard and Woody Shaw music in my upbringing. My dad's a big jazz fan too, so he was always listening to kind of more of the '70s Freddie Hubbard records, Red Clay, Bundle of Joy, First Light, um, and then some of the Woody Shaw records I remember hearing a lot of too. So trumpet players and trombone players were a big influence on me early on.
What was the first live jazz show you saw that blew you away?
Huh. Hmm. Well, I'd have to say one of the first things that I used to see every Tuesday night in Portland, Oregon, there was this jazz club called Jimmy Mac's, and unfortunately, the owner passed away a few years ago, and the club closed down. But they used to have the Mel Brown Septet, which is kind of like these like local legendary players that all played in that band. Um, and my teacher Stan Bach also played in that band, and so we used to go all the time, like pretty much like at least a couple times a month, and go hear that band live, septet, four horns with rhythm section. And so I think that that was a huge influence, and hearing those guys play and hearing each individual instrument that's part of the big band, with the exception of the baritone saxophone, and hearing those instruments played at a high level, I think that was really inspiring to hear pretty often as a young developing musician.
So as someone that doesn't play an instrument, especially the trombone, I'm always interested. What is somebody that's on the inside that's very well versed with this instrument? What's the best thing about playing the trombone that maybe the civilian doesn't understand?
I don't know. That's like a hard question. I mean, I think like music is kind of like this uh there's a certain satisfaction with pushing your ability level against what you can against your challenge level, right? So like you're always trying to find something that's challenging just enough, but that you're barely able to conquer. And when you're able to do that, it gives you some type of like feeling of like victory. And I think that's not necessarily the trombone. That's just music in general. But I think that happens in sports too. You know, you don't want to pit an NBA team against like a high school team where they just completely demolish them. That's no fun. You want to have like a competition where it's like, who's going to win? We're going to triple overtime, and then right at the last second, you win, and then it's like a celebration. And as musicians, especially jazz musicians, I think that we're always trying to push the envelope there, and we're trying to find that optimal level between ability and challenge, and surmount that. And in doing that, it kind of it's like a great like boost. You know, there's something like just that feels great about being able to do that. As far as anything specific to the trombone, um, I think that the trombone has a great sound. I like the sound of the instrument, and I think I'm not being biased at this point anymore in my career because as a composer, I've had to learn to recognize the strengths and weaknesses of every instrument. Um, and you know, I think the trombone like actually has a great sound, has the ability to have a little bit more vocal quality than some of the other instruments that maybe are a little bit more mechanical, um, and have space between each notes. You know, the trombone is one of the only instruments that can actually fully play like the full range of musical tones from start to finish. Um, you know, including all of those semitones in between. So I think that's a special thing about it as well.
That's where I was getting. That's kind of what I was thinking too. There's something
Yeah.
very special about the slide. It seems like all the other instruments have very specific levers and pulleys on it, but with the trombone, you gotta have this latitude that's a little different. Kind of the, the metaphor is it's genuinely freedom, which is the cornerstone of jazz.
Yeah, I mean, and obviously with freedom comes the ability to make really bad decisions too. And so, you know, so like it, you know, trombone is an instrument that when played well, I think can steal the show like against any other instrument. But when it's played poorly, it can ruin the music too. You know, because you have all that ability to hit all these wrong notes and other stuff in there, you have to be really precise. You have to bring like an extra element of precision and methodology to how you practice and how you like perfect your technique on the instrument. And I think that lends itself to a lot of jazz trombonists have ended up becoming composers, and a lot of jazz trombonists sing as well. I think that extra level of having to use your ear in order to produce the sound, I think kind of lends itself to that.
Kind of like Del Feo, he kind of does that. That's his vibe a little bit.
Yeah, he sings. I've never heard him sing before, actually.
I think on his last New Orleans party that came out in 2020, I could swear he was singing on that. And I don't know if it was kind of just that vibe of the New Orleans spirit, just kind of chiming
Yeah.
in with everybody, but it seems like he was doing that on there.
Oh,
Um,
cool.
yeah, there's a guy here in Kansas City that puts stained glass within the folds of the instrument, and he came and did a show at the Blue Room. And I can't remember the guy's name, but he's really well known, and he does that to horns, specifically trombones. So I'll have to find it out and let you know. I can't believe it's escaping me. The interesting thing, one of the first times I ever asked a question like this about an instrument was with Ken Peplowski. I asked about the clarinet. I was like, what is it about the clarinet for somebody that's not a master on it? And he said the beautiful thing about the clarinet is you can go on and it has this great sound, but if you hit one wrong note, you can ruin everything. Which is totally true for the clarinet because it can. It's like a bad goose honk. It can really throw it off track,
Yeah.
you know?
It's interesting too because you know on the topic of the trombone, because I feel like part of what you're getting at is like why did you choose this instrument? I didn't choose the instrument. I was forced to join band in the sixth
Sure.
grade. So, but my parents brought home an instrument that they bought from some family friends. They're like, "Here's the instrument. You're gonna join band now."
Yeah. Yeah.
So, like, I ended up kind of coming to love the instrument over time. It wasn't like I was like, "This is the thing that I'm gonna do," and you know, I probably could have ended up being a decent player on any of the instruments. You know, assuming I put in the same level of effort, you know.
That's the two-in-one answer right there for sure. Um, so let me ask you this. You're a pretty busy guy, you're an arranger, you're a composer, you're a recording artist, an educator, but at the end of the day, out of all of these things that you do as a musician, what do you look forward to the most? What do you love the most about being in this profession as a musician?
Well, I mean, I think most people would probably say just like the community and the hang, getting to meet interesting people and spend time with them both on and off the bandstand, I think is like one of the great parts of this. Like I feel like most people, they go to their 9 to 5 job, and as soon as it's over, they just can't wait to leave. And I think for a lot of musicians, obviously it's not true every time you play, but most of the time when you're playing a gig that you make good music with people, I feel like there's something personal about yourself that's shared on the stage, and hanging out with people afterwards and like having a drink and eating some food and like talking, sharing stories about different experiences on the road, etc. I think that's like a really great part that kind of like, you know, draws all of us, into staying in in this community, for a lifetime.
Yeah. I know for a lot of people, there's that album, there's that moment that pulls them into jazz. It's like a warm serum that goes on and on for a lifetime. What is that love of jazz that you have? Why do you love jazz?
I don't know. It's like, I mean, like part of what I said before is, I think definitely part of it. Um, Also, I've always kind of had a little bit more of like a what's the word for it? Like a mind for like more ethereal and like less concrete concepts. I like science fiction. I like anime. I like those types of things, and I like music that kind of like lifts us off of like the terrestrial kind of like feeling. When I think of popular music, I feel like it's like the point of that music is to feed into our very base instincts as human beings, and like the themes of the music and the way the music feels is usually about sexuality and or it'll be some type of political topic or something like that, something that's very about the culture that we live in. Whereas I feel like in a lot of like classical music and with jazz, it's this uplifting thing. We're reaching for something beyond our world. We're reaching for like the stars and the universe, and we're exploring like these more like wide ranging ideas. And that's why it's really interesting, because it really allows you to kind of think and zone out and be taken out of the world for a moment. It's like a nice reprieve, as opposed to be, let me listen to this hip hop song with like a super heavy beat and and listen to all the things that are going wrong right now. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's nice to be taken out of it, and I think that the sound of jazz, I think it generally does that. Our version of the more you know terrestrial sound of the earth in the jazz world is the blues. I think that's like the down home thing, and everything else can still expand off from that into those kind of more spacey type sounds.
I love that answer, man. And I think that's one of the reasons why I like the 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 whole idea of jazz more because of I mean, I like vocals, I get into it, but I prefer to have just the instrumental because then you can float. You can float in that warm cosmic ether that just takes you to all kinds of different places. It's like an open ticket to the universe, you know?
Exactly. Yeah.
So, yeah, totally. Um, Speaking of this kind of dreamy state that we're in right now, let's say we get off the phone, time machine pulls up in front of your house, you can hop in to the Jazz DeLorean, you punch in the digits, you can see any show anywhere, anytime. Where are you going?
Oof. Maybe I'd like to see John Coltrane quartet at the Village Vanguard. You know,
Yeah,
or see JJ Johnson perform live. Never got to see him
yeah,
perform live. I didn't get to see Curtis Fuller play when he was in his prime either. I'd love to see like the Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers play live.
yeah,
Duke Ellington Orchestra.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's, you know, obviously so many, but those are some of the ones that come to mind like right away.
It's funny you say Art Blakey. Yesterday, they have this series in Kansas City down at the Blue Room called the Thursday at Noon. It's a free show. It was done during the pandemic and they would broadcast it out, but now it's live and they have cats that come in and perform for an hour and it's kind of they have interviews. So I'm walking up and there's a friend of mine who's a wonderful musician, Dan Thomas, and he taught with Bobby Watson and Bobby's standing there and it was kind of an extra treat to be able to see Bobby on stage. So I was just when you said the messengers, it's like that's the one thing. My son was with me. He's 18 and I was like, "You just saw a legend today." All right? So it's pretty
Yeah,
cool to have that opportunity in Kansas City to still see, legendary forces that are out there that are, um, part of dream gigs perhaps, for sure. Um, so everyone out there has a perception of you, family, friends, and fans, but ultimately you're in control, you're in charge. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
uh, I don't know. That's a tough question, I guess. Um, I don't know. I'm just like I just feel like I'm a normal guy that plays the trombone and writes music. You know, that's like how I would see myself. Um, and I think that's probably the way other people see me once they get to know me. I think that maybe, you know, the way the whole Instagram world and the way people present themselves like in public when you're doing concerts and stuff, you kind of tend to appear a little bit larger than life. And I think people probably perceive me as like, oh, look at this guy who thinks he's, you know, this big shot and, you know, whatever, always wearing the fancy suits and doing all this stuff, you know. But I think generally speaking, once people get to know me, I think maybe their conception of who I am is probably similar to mine. I'd like to believe that, but who knows, you
Right.
know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's the idea of perception, it's interesting. So, Javier, if anyone out there wants to pick up this newest album, your previous albums, learn about live shows, anything about your world, where's the best place?
Right now, I would check out my website, javiernero.com. I actually just recently updated it, but I'm going to try to stay on top of it better in the future. But my Instagram is probably the thing that I use the most. So if you want to like check out what I'm doing, I would definitely follow me on Instagram. It's at Dr. Javier Nero, and that's Dr. Dr. Not the word spelled out. Um, yeah, so those are the two places I'd recommend.
When did Instagram become the preferred platform? It's wild. Everybody's using it now.
I have no idea, and, like,
It's weird.
I resisted it for a very long time, and then at a certain point, I felt like I had to, you
Yeah.
know. I think Facebook has kinda become like the older people's
Yeah.
is it now? Well, and Instagram is kind of like old people now too. All of these, like, young kids now, no one's on Instagram.
Right.
They use, like, TikTok and Twitter,
Yeah.
you know? It's like, I'm never going on TikTok.
Right. Right. Hey, man, this has been great. Thank you for opening up. There's so many revelatory things that you discussed. I'm glad that we had the chance to connect. I know we had some hiccups before, so we finally get to meet. Thank you so much, man. Best of luck with your career, and I look forward to hopefully subsequent conversations down the line.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Oh, I just wanted to mention real quick, in case this goes out soon enough. But if you're in the Baltimore DMV area, I'm playing a live show of all the music from this current album at Keystone Corner on Friday, August 18th. We have two
Okay.
sets, 7 and 9 p.m., 7 and 9:30 p.m. And Sean Jones and Christy the Shield will be on the gig too as guest artists.
Right on, man.
August 18th.
Right on. Cool. Yeah, I will make sure that we get it out there and let everybody know. Javier, this has been great. Thank you again. Best of luck with everything.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thanks for having me
Absolutely.
on.